Tourettes Syndrome, which was hugely successful, and she's also very knowledgeable on the NDIS, but she'll tell you all about it. And because, as you probably know, it was first rolled out in South Australia, so they've had a longer period of time to navigate it. But I'll hand over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Just going to make sure that's working, yes. Please feel free to get up and grab tea and coffee and come back while I'm talking. That will be absolutely fine. Being the last speaker, I've quickly rubbed out all the things that other people have already covered to make sure that I'm not duplicating. I work in a child and family focused practice of 10 psychologists and 5 developmental educators in Adelaide, and I've had the experience over the last 15 years of working with quite a lot of children and teenagers and their families with Tourette's syndrome. I see about one new client a month in South Australia, newly diagnosed. So over the last 15-20 years, I've had the most fantastic opportunity to learn a great deal from those kids, those teenagers, those families about not only what is helping them, but also about Tourette's syndrome as a whole. And some of the families that I work with in Adelaide are listening in, so hello to them and thank you to them. Over and over today, what we've been hearing about, of course, is the iceberg of Tourette's syndrome, which is what I'm talking about today. And what we're hearing, and you know so well, is that it's the under the surface conditions, issues, what Adam called his companions, that are the aspects that are the hardest, cause the most challenges at home, and certainly are the hardest for teachers to grasp, to understand and to deal with. Today what I want to do is to be really practical, to finish off today on a really practical note, to share my ideas about these under the surface differences and very practical ideas for you as parents or teachers, but particularly aimed at parents, but also to give you some ideas to talk to your therapist, your psychologist, occupational therapist or whatever. There's a general sense in Australia that there aren't very many psychologists that are experts in Tourette's syndrome, and sadly that's true, but there's a lot of child psychologists out there, and a lot of what I'm going to suggest to you today is that any psychologist that works with children is absolutely capable of using a lot of the strategies that I'm going to suggest to you today. So hopefully it also gives you time to go back and talk to your own therapist about. The umbrella that ties, you've heard a lot about this today. Dr. Dale called it a fault in the regulation of the brain. I couldn't agree more. The umbrella term for me that ties all of the issues together is disinhibition, a faulty stop button. That is calling it a faulty stop button and talking in those terms is something that my clients, my parents tell me that has been such a helpful way to think about all the issues, all the differences. Kids will often come to my practice with what I call alphabet syndrome. So they've got so many initials. They've got more letters after their name than I've got. They've got TSAA, ASD, OCD, SPD, IED, the new one is intermittent explosive disorder. And parents will often say to me, well, how come one child, like, how did we win this lottery? How did one child have so many things going on? And how unfair is it that we've got all of this? And my response to that is to talk about the fact that this is an umbrella. What joins all of those things together is a faulty stop button. That is a fault in the inhibition system of the body, in the same way that motor and physical and vocal tics are also issues of disinhibition, or as Dr. Dale called it, regulation. So we talk a lot about things we can't stop. So I can't stop urges to do something, otherwise known as OCD. I can't stop having episodes of anger, intermittent explosive disorder, the new name, rage, getting excessively worried about things, which we call anxiety. I can't stop being impulsive, we call that ADHD. I can't stop being disorganised, executive dysfunction, and so it goes on. We have a Facebook Tourette's Syndrome group page in South Australia, and I posted the question, what's one thing that you can't stop and that's a problem for you? And I really loved some of these answers. Have a look, and I'm sure some of these will be incredibly familiar to you as well. So I can't stop picking up my sores, I can't stop hitting my sister, I can't stop touching clothes as I walk past them in a store, I can't stop playing Minecraft. Adam mentioned this morning, I can't stop doing dangerous things when he was a child, or I can't stop shouting out answers. So the three that I am going to refer to most often this afternoon are the ones that I'm most commonly asked about of the under the surface things, and they are OCD, which of course we're hearing a great deal about today, anger, which we haven't really talked about quite so much, and anxiety. There's no doubt that OCD is the most common issue that kids with Tourettes Syndrome are dealing with, apart from their tics. I'm not going to talk, a lot of people talk about OCD, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but just to give you a slide that really highlights again this difference. People talk about OCD. If you talk to a teacher about OCD, they're going to straight away think about the O, meaning the obsession, the obsessional thought, which is often an unhelpful, catastrophic, exaggerated, really unlikely thought, like I am going to die, followed by a feeling of being anxious, resulting in a child being compelled to do something, and that reduces their anxiety. That is not the form of OCD that I see. I rarely see that form of OCD in kids with a diagnosis of Tourette's syndrome. The form of OCD that I see on a daily basis is just right OCD. And the biggest difference is, well, there are several differences, but the biggest of them is that there isn't an obsession, there isn't a thought, there's not something. And so if you're a parent thinking, well, is this a tic or is it OCD? And there's no O, then you're thinking, well, it can't be OCD. But in fact, just right OCD starts with not an unhelpful thought, but just a rather strong physical, sensory urge, a feeling that kids can describe as being a need or a drive in my brain, a sense that something's going to burst out of me, pressure, and a sense that this tension, feeling restless and tense, but not feeling anxious, not like normal OCD. This feeling of tension and anxious will only go if I do something in a really fixed way. So I'm compelled to do something, and as Dr. Dale said, it's lining up, evening up, doing things in a particular order, symmetry, touching and retouching things, and those that gives the just right feeling, which reduces or takes away the strong urge. It's so important to recognise the difference between them because the treatment for each is totally different. I'm going to talk a little bit about the approaches that we use with Just Right OCD as we go on. So if we accept that all of these under the iceberg things are about a faulty stop button, then what is our job to support, to help? This is the kind of language to be using. We're helping a child fight back against their urges, be stronger than the internal force, make that faulty stop button work. This kind of approach means that you're working with your child against those external factors that are impacting on their life. We know that when we're doing, those of us who are working in trying to train kids in competing responses to physical tics, know how incredibly hard that is. It's one of the hardest things that we ask kids to do, to actually try and fight a physical urge. It's actually really hard to fight back against some of these other urges that we're talking about today too, the anxiety, the compulsive urges, the anger. But the really exciting thing is that we actually can have success in these areas. Regularly, we can get kids to reduce their compulsive behaviour, we can get them to reduce their anxiety, we can get them to become less impulsive, and all of that results in a calmer child, a calmer family, and that might just have a circular impact on tic activity as well, because a lot of clients will say to me, if things are kept smooth and calm, we see a lot less tic activity. So I'm going to skip through this, but CBT, just to reassure you that everything that we do as clinical psychologists is always based on CBT, the link between thoughts, emotions and behaviour, and you'll see that flavour. What I want to do is to talk to you about 6 stages in intervention, and they're kind of not, you don't do one and then start 2 and then move on to 3. They're kind of intertwined a bit, but to try and give you a sense, and don't we love an acronym? I had to have an acronym. So we're talking about the acronym of S-STAR, starting with E, externalise. I'll go through each of these. Self-awareness, triggers, thoughts, actions, and repeat. But of these, in my mind, the most important one is externalization. Externalization is where we help the child to imagine and create something that's external to the child and that's responsible for the behaviour, and that together you are going to fight. So as I said before, this is about you and the child fighting against a third party rather than you and the child fighting with each other. The examples I'm going to give you, the most common age in our practice that we start working with kids around these issues is 7 to 10, which coincides with, as you saw Dr. Dale showing you, that's the most common age of diagnosis, and kids are referred to our practice from neurologists in the week that they've been diagnosed. So we see a lot of 7 to 9-year-olds. And so the examples I'm giving you are heavily oriented towards that age group. So if you are the parent of an older child, obviously you're going to need to think, well, how could I modify that? Some of what I'm going to show you is going to look a bit young. So we are going, here are a couple of examples that I just love of that one client did externalised. He's got totally evil guy. He wrote totally not evil guy, but he meant totally evil guy. And Daryl the thought-messing monster. And so he's conceptualised out to at this externalised character. Oops, I've missed a slide. Okay. Some of the phrases that we might use, some of the phrases we might use in terms of externalising are things like talking back to OCD, the worry monster, controlling your warrior, putting on the brakes, taming the angry beast, managing a turbocharged car, any kind of an externalisation that appeals to the child. Okay, stage 2, self-awareness. Many of you will have noticed that your child is sometimes not even aware of their tics themselves. And in a similar way, we notice that they're not actually all that noticing of their anxiety or their OCD or even of their angry outbursts. It's just, there's a second stage in my mind which is helping kids to become much more aware, having much greater self-awareness, so that we've got something to work on. So for example, with anxiety, we would explore with the child what's happening in their body, and this is where we would introduce the child to the idea of the body, the in-body security system, the fight or flight response that's designed to keep us safe. You're all familiar with that, by the amygdala producing adrenaline through our bodies, so which, the one goal being survival. But I think part of this disinhibition syndrome that I'm talking about today, this faulty stop button, is that often that in-body alarm system is also faulty. It goes off too readily, many of you will know the toaster analogy, and we use that very regularly, talking about the fact that, in a fancy hotel like I stayed in last night, there's a really sensitive alarm system, so that if I cooked a bit of toast this morning, I would have been opening the door and the window and making sure that there was no smoke, knowing that the alarm would go off quite readily if there was even just a whiff of smoke from the toast. That's the Tourettes Syndrome alarm system to me. It's like, and I remember one kid that I was talking to about it, he said, it's really nice, it's like, I've got like a 5-star hotel alarm system. I said, yeah, you absolutely have, and we're going to just dumb this down a bit. We just really need you to be in a budget motel system instead. He didn't really want to do that, but it was a great way of thinking about it. Of course, saying to kids, but you think at home, mum burns toast all the time, you burn toast all the time, and the alarm system doesn't go off. That's what we're aiming towards. The warrior, the idea of a warrior working too hard to protect me, and just many of you know this beautiful book, which is the best explanation of the fight or flight system, Hey Warrior by Karen Young. And I nicked a photo of her so she doesn't mind, you're out and all that, because it's a really really good idea. That's for anxiety. When we're working with kids who are dealing with disinhibited anger, outbursts of anger, then we will work with a tool which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, a 5-point scale, where we're helping the child to identify what zone I'm in, how do I look and feel in that zone, what am I doing in that zone. So, we've got from green zone, the colours haven't come out very well on this, but at the green, very pale green zone at the bottom, I'm calm, relaxed and focused, up to level 3, a yellow-orange zone, I'm getting really frustrated and really annoyed, I've got a loud voice, I'm not listening, I've got an angry face, and up to a 5. When I'm at a 5, I'm exploding, yelling, hitting, hurting and throwing things. And although that seems really obvious to us as parents, often when we introduce that idea, it's the first time that often parents will say, oh, there's no zones, my child goes from 0 to 100, or 0 to 5, or 0 to 10, whatever the scale is. And we go, well, let's just have a think about that over the next couple of weeks. And actually, very young children can start to identify different stages that they're at. This is the self-awareness stage, but it feels very much on the action stage of what tools are we going to coach the child in so that they're able to bring themselves back from 5 to 3 and ultimately to 1.
Is that in Tourette's rage seems to be a square wave,
yeah.
Whereas normal, whatever that means,
yeah.
Rage, whether it's through trauma or
yes.
whether it's through whatever,
yeah.
Is a build up and then the rage and then the build down.
Yes.
So how does that apply to a square wave, or doesn't it?
It does, in that you have to be super good at noticing the early warning signs, because they are there, even in
square wave
absolutely,
neurological.
Absolutely, there are still early warning signs that parents and children can be coached to notice. They can be fleeting, they can be subtle, and they can be as little as a rigidity of eye and face. There can be just a fleeting moment. But when parents go away and start to think about what is it how do I know that he or she is just about to explode? It's subtle, and for some kids it's a lot harder than others. But it's certainly not the case that all children will only go from a 1 to a 5. There's often stages, and our goal is to get them and their parents to be more aware of what those intermediate stages are, because the strategies at different stages are different. If you can catch a child at a 3, then you're going to be using, we'll go on to this, but redirection and distraction and active activities, and yeah, can come back to that later. We will use various different, based on the age of the child and the interest of the child. Here's a similar thing, but going the other way, looking at zones of regulation. This comes from, what is it called? That movie? Inside Out. Thank you very much. Always when we're working to help the child to identify things, we're going to be using their favourite activities, their interests, computer games that they're into, whatever, as a theme. This is just a little extract of a 1 to 5 scale that we developed with a child who was very Minecraft keen, but it might be Star Wars, animals, planets, all sorts of things that kids are interested in. So the idea of developing a 5-point scale, here the ones I've shown you are about the zones of anger, but you can chart all sorts of things to help kids to become self-aware, to become more self-aware. If what you're dealing with is compulsive behaviours, then you can look at strengths of compulsion, from 1, I don't have any sense of compulsion at the moment, through to 5, I will die if I don't get to hit my sister right now. So those levels, we can do the same process. It can be levels of anxiety, from very calm and happy through to incredibly anxious. It could be engine speed, running from too slow, which is sluggish, depressed, lacking in energy, through to just right. And normally that goes to too fast, but with kids with Tourette's Syndrome, we often think about way too fast. Where's Adam? I'm always telling Adam his engine speed is way too fast, and he needs to bring it back up again. So, we can look at different concepts, but apply the same idea of trying to improve your child's self-awareness of what's going on. Triggers, T for triggers. Really important that we start identifying what triggers the behaviour in CBIT. This is the antecedents in behavioural terms. Also, really hugely important for parents to be able to use this information to look at what changes have to be made in the child's environment, home, family, school, when we're out and about, to minimise the triggers and provide alternative ways for the child to get those needs met. For example, if the trigger to a rage attack is having to share something with my sister, then obviously that's going to lead you to think about strategies to minimise sharing, to have rules around sharing, how you're going to organise materials in the back of the car. There's a whole lot of environmental management. If the urge is to hit someone 3 times, then what else can that child hit? Have we got a punching bag? Have we got pillows? Have we got those at school? Have we got those in the back of the car? What are we doing to make sure that the environment provides alternatives? Okay, stage 4, thoughts. Really important here. Again, we have this strong flavour of externalising and fighting back, being stronger than the internal force. Throughout therapy, we really encourage parents to use these positive thoughts and to try and encourage them in kids. So I'm not going to do that right now, it's just my off switch gone wonky, my stop button's not working, I don't have to do what OCD tells me to, I'm doing it my way, I don't have to listen to junk thoughts, those kind of phrases. We often call them self-talk because what can I tell myself, especially with younger children, because the idea of what am I thinking, a lot of kids don't actually have what we call metacognition, that is, they're not actually aware that they have thoughts, and so we'll do lots of work with a speech bubble, and I've got this, one of my favourite things ever is a little whiteboard in the shape of a thought bubble, and I hold it up all the time, even in staff meetings. What am I thinking? What am I telling myself? It's really helpful to get kids anyway to be recognising what are they telling themselves. The basis of that is that we know, you know, what we've learned about CBT is that what I tell myself, what I'm thinking, impacts on what I'm feeling about things, and that impacts on the choice of behaviour I make. So starting point being making sure that what I am thinking about things is very positive. Here is an example of a exercise, this kind of thing that we would often do, getting kids to recognise what we would call green, going back to the traffic lights idea, green is always good, red is always bad. Green thoughts and very helpful green thoughts and what are unhelpful green thoughts. I think that, again, because of that faulty stop button, kids with Tourettes Syndrome often catastrophise. They overestimate the negatives in situations, and so helping them to notice that and to look at what they could be telling themselves differently is one really strong avenue of addressing that catastrophizing. So, you know, up here we've got some green thoughts like everyone makes mistakes, it's no big deal, I've done it once before, I can do it again, and red ones, you know, I messed up, I can't do anything right, I'm hopeless at this. So again, one of the this is a flavour that goes through all of the work that we're doing, not just restricted to this stage. Right, and finally the biggest one, and I could seriously talk for all day about strategies, fight back strategies. I just want to share a few little, to give you a bit of a flavour of what we do in our practice. In the Just Right form of OCD that I mentioned to you earlier on, absolutely number one approach is showing OCD what we call showing OCD who is boss. And of course, if the child is externalised it, you know, one little kind of mind calls him Mr. Stinky Poo. So showing Mr. Stinky Poo who is boss. So delay, limit, change, walk away. The 4 strategies that a child can choose, or child or teenager can choose to do. I'm going to show OCD who's boss because I'll choose one of these things, and the choice will depend on what the compulsion is. For example, if the urge was to touch the door on both sides when walking through, you know, so that's a really common It happens in every door. It's symmetrical. It has to be first the right hand and the left hand. Very common kind of thing. We would be saying, okay, this week, let's see how you can fight back events. What could you do with delay? You could tell OCD that I'm not going to do that through this door. I'm going to do it in the next door I walk through. I'm going to limit. I'll decide how many times I'll touch. Instead of doing once, I might make it 2 times on one side and 3 on the other. This time I might, by the time I get to the kitchen, I might touch it 7 times. Walking back through the bathroom, I'm going to touch it 1 time. It doesn't matter if you touch it more. It's doing anything that overrides the OCD-driven urge to touch exactly left, right. I'm going to change. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to kick the door instead. I'm going to punch the door instead. I'm going to touch up on my shoulder and down. I'm going to swirl. I'm going to do anything else. I'm going to do a hip-hop dance through the middle of the door. But I am not going to do what OCD is driving me to do. Or I'm just going to walk away. Well, that doesn't really work if you've got to get through the door. But do you see how that wouldn't be a good choice to make if that was the urge? So that will be this weekly work, or when I say weekly, each time we see the child sitting down saying, okay, what's the urge we're going to work on this time? Let's map it. Which of these choices do you think is going to work really well? Okay, with mum and dad's help, you go away and try fighting back against that urge. I generally, because I only get to see just kids once a month at the most, and so tend to have 2 or 3 urges that they're working on at a time. And it is incredible how often I'll get them back and go, okay, tell me about the first one. They'll say, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I used to have to twist the 2. Oh, I don't do that anymore. As soon as you start fighting back against OCD, these just right OCD urges in one urge, there will often be just a dropping away of urges in other ones. There'll be other ones that come up and take their place, but you can keep on working at those. If anger, rage, explosive reactions are the issue, as I mentioned before, when we're using a 1 to 5 scale around different anger, our goal there is, in terms of the actions, is working with the child about what they're going to do to get back to green zone. So this is a typical example of that. These were his ideas. Time out, call mum when I'm in my red zone at a 5. I can't manage myself. I need an adult to come and help me. When I'm at orange though, I can change what I do, choose a chin out, which I'll talk to you about, and so on. So take 3 deep breaths. I think what's interesting is that when we, as adults, if we think about, okay, I am really annoyed, irritated, aggravated, frustrated, I'm having that explosion of negative feeling, what am I going to do about it? We almost always choose calm cooldowns. We have calm ideas. We think that what works for us best is to take 3 deep breaths, calm down, go to a quiet place. It's a calming approach. But my experience is that, particularly with the excitability that happens for kids with Tourette's, the disinhibition, is that often a calm down for them that's going to work better is going to be getting busy. So building Lego, doing some construction, eating something crunchy, sorting something out, or really active ideas. So jumping on a trampoline, getting punching bags. How many times have I mentioned punching bags? I'm a big fan of punching bags. Hitting a pillow, going and running with my dog out in the backyard. So these are cooldowns, which just are an alternative outlet, very, very different from the behavioural approaches of when you are in a red zone, you go to timeout. You are punished. You are going to go to timeout. It just doesn't work for kids with disinhibition syndrome. They didn't make a choice to be where they are, and providing a punishment doesn't make it less likely. I think Adam referred to that this morning at school. He calls out, he gets detention, and he just calls out again. It's not going to make a difference. Punishment regimes don't work for kids with disinhibition syndrome. So we've got to get cleverer at us staying neutral and redirecting into these kinds of cool-down activities. There are, you can just you can Google coping tools or cool-down cards and you will get literally 3 million hits of these kinds of cards. I don't even remember which website we borrow these from, but there's literally thousands of them. It's simply a case of working with a child to find out which ones work for them. So these are the things that are in the category that Dr. Dale talked about before: mindfulness, relaxation, yoga. These are cooldowns, which are little tools that we can coach a child into using. In addition, of course, I've really focused on ones for home, but you can imagine how you can, with your teacher, adapt quite a lot of these into a school context as well. Am I going to time? 2 minutes?
Yeah,
No?
two more questions.
Yes, that's what I wanted to draw in. Okay. So, sometimes when we talk about a toolkit, we actually make a toolkit. These are a couple. Oh, well, the pink one is off the web. This is one that we've made. The idea of putting everything together. So this one here is the pink one, pointing here. The pink one, there's a bubble blower, a little sensory fidget thing, and some copies of those coping tool cards as a reminder. This break box has got noise-reducing headphones, putty, lots of sensory stuff in there, but it's also got some cards that have got reminders of the zones and the strategies. Great to produce and have at school, really good for teachers. All of the strategies that we use in our practice have a really strong theme of empowerment. Here, I love this one. It was one of our clients' representation of all the imaginary powers that he has. He's created he's called him I can't even say it, Carmelian character. He's got he imagines himself going through life with an invisibility cloak to ignore other people around him, an anti-annoying shield that he can put up when he's starting to get that immediately aggravated response that happens to him a lot. Big wide shoulder pads to shrug off enemies and antagonists. They are, in his mind, people or situations that trigger him immediately into those angry outbursts. Just having that image in his mind has been really helpful. But you know what? It's really helpful for his parents too, because it gives them something to refer back to be talking about. Would have been good to use your invisibility shield just then, and those kinds of phrases. Again, with the externalization, something that fighting back against something external. And repeat. Well, you know how lovely that was a theme of the conference anyway. Every single time that a child successfully fights the urge to do something, or uses a calming strategy, or chooses to use a cool down, every single time that they do that, in my mind, it's a win against the disinhibition. And it gives that child so much more sense that they do have some control over their faulty stop button. And that's a good thing. So that's what we are aiming to do, to give them a cumulative sense of having some control over their stop button. All right, I am going to pause there and ask for questions. We thought this was a session that we might have some questions. I just want to check the time.
Yeah, you're okay.
Because
it's just me today.
Yeah.
The other topic was the NDAs.
NDAs, that's right. Just so we can judge it, can I just get a show of hands around NDAs? Hands up if that's something you would really like me to talk a bit about. If you really strongly like it, put your hand up really high so I can really, okay, it's about half-half. And if you're mildly interested, could you just put your hand up a little bit? Okay. And just a different show of hands. Hands up anyone that actually is on NDAs and knows lots about it in the room.
We don't know lots about
Don't know, but you are on it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I think we should cover
Yes.
it. Yeah, I think there's enough people to make it. If there were only 3 or 4 of you, I'd say it's really not a good thing for us to spend group time, but it's more than half. Would you agree, Robert? Yeah, okay. So what I suggest that we do is I'm going to pause and take questions about these practical strategies and this approach, and then go on and tell you a little bit about NDAs from my experience.
Have we got any questions on the first part of the talk? Yes, up the back, Yale.
When you say that, when you say that the Tourette's OCD doesn't seem to have the obsessive part as much.
Yes.
Is that sort of neglecting the idea of intrusive thoughts? Because they are very obsessive, and I just had a question from somebody in Victoria who's
Yes.
watching, and would like to know what you have to say about intrusive.
Yes, so intrusive thoughts are very much in the category of traditional OCD. That is that there is an obsession, there is an obsess. You know, the difference between just right OCD and traditional OCD is the presence of an obsession. So if there is an obsessive thought, that is an unhelpful, often catastrophized, often exaggerated thought, then that is more traditional OCD.
In talk of intrusive thoughts, it's
Yes.
more like the idea that you want to stab your mother.
Right.
Or that you want to throw yourself under a car, rather than an obsessive thought.
Yeah.
In the sense
Oh,
of
an intrusive thought. Okay, I see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah, intrusive thoughts are inherently part of just right OCD because it's the thought that is part that accompanies that. What I described is that physical. You know, it's really interesting hearing kids talk about how it's a pressure in their body, it's a pressure in their brain, accompanied by an intrusive thought.
So it's obsessive, but it's not the same kind of obsession.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And can I just go on and say the difference between those two is that when we have an obsession, there is another part of therapy that we do, which is helping the child to challenge that obsessive thought, to think, well, how likely is that? What evidence is it? And what protective fact? You know, if I have a true obsession that unless I do X, then my mother is going to die, you know, that would be a really common, or, you know, I'm going to die, that would be a really common obsessional thought that drives OCD. Then one of the stages we need to be working really hard at is helping the child think, well, how likely is that? Is OCD just messing with my brain? Yes, OCD is just messing with your brain. There is, how often has your mother died so far? And then what protective factors are there? What's stopping your mother dying? She does a pretty good job of keeping herself alive. Let's look at all the things she does every day that keep herself alive. And I you know, that process helps a child to go, oh yeah, actually OCD is just mucking around with my brain. But if you don't have that thought, if you've just got this physical urge to hit, or this physical urge to touch something twice, that isn't relevant. So we just move straight in. Yes.
She said easily that she has intrusive thoughts
Yes.
that are linked to a behaviour.
Yes.
Stop the intrusive thoughts. So
Yes.
it's sort of
Yeah. You know, and in some ways we're probably being a bit subtle here about the differences. What you're describing, what I'm describing is OCD. It's that link between some kind of compulsion, an urge, a behaviour and the big important point here is that the child or the adult has learned that if I engage in that behaviour, I get anxiety going down, and our job is to help them to experiment with the possibility that actually if I hold out and don't engage in that behaviour, the anxiety is going to go down anyway because our bodies are attuned to do that. Anxiety for no one stays that high level. Anxiety always crashes like a wave, and if we just hold out and wait long enough, anxiety goes down again. It has to, because the brain is designed to make the adrenaline and noradrenaline, the anxiety chemicals, the neurotransmitters, to drop down again. No one has ever gone up to this level of anxiety and stayed there and died of anxiety. It doesn't happen. Anxiety always drops down, and so that's the bit of why do we hold out against the urge. Yes.
I'll just let Scott, because I know he's going to comment specifically on that. Then we've got a question at the back. So Scott's just I know he wants to respond directly to that one.
Yes.
I'm either really unlucky or really lucky. I've got a child who has a whole range of these things and has post-traumatic stress disorder and triggers and all sorts of stuff. And I've worked with kids and I've worked with teenagers and I've worked in juvenile detention centres, and I've never seen anything like a true Tourette's rage, where it just suddenly starts and it's pretty severe, and then just suddenly stops and there's no wave.
Yeah.
Because the biochemistry is not impacted at all. It's purely neurological, and it doesn't occur through a trigger or a thought. It just happens and it suddenly stops.
Then a lot of the strategies that we're successfully using with the kids that have explosive rage, is a different.
Absolutely, there's a different mechanism.
Different mechanism.
Yeah, and he goes through all of them. I can tell
Yeah.
which one because it's either triggered and then.
I was just going to say, I
tails off
imagine
or-
on other occasions there are times when you do
absolutely.
see a triggered anger attack,
Absolutely.
and these strategies are going to work for a triggered anger
So I think it's
attack.
important just to say there is a Tourette rage that's just purely something
Very,
else.
very rare though, as you say, lucky or unlucky.
Yeah.
So we'll just go. No, there was someone waiting, so we'll just go again. Jump in.
So where am I looking?
Who was it? Was it Diane? She's gone.
Diane?
She's gone. She left the room. Next. Sorry.
Start here, just in the front here. Yes. Oh, sorry. Next.
The gentleman in the front saying what he is, it's true. When I don't know why my Tourette's will just get to a certain level, and even though I've taken 3 lots of Epilim every day, 7 days a week, for so many years, the dose has really never changed. But my brain, for some reason, yet I've been in corporate jobs, executive jobs, hidden it from everybody. I still have had that time when I could have just gone, and all of a sudden I will come down as though someone's made me light like a feather. But it keeps me up there. And I think sometimes that's because I've had to make such, sorry, I don't mean to talk one way, I've had to make such horrific decisions with 22 staff, 4 of them nurses, people dying in my arms, and I would get there and I would think to myself, TJ, his friends call me, don't let this get to you, just keep on the pills, love, and do the job. And I often called 7 days a week, and until I was very ill, I had to retire.
I think that's a really great example.
So true.
I think that's really a great.
And all of a sudden, you drop some weight. I think, well, look, old Brandy isn't so bad, and my arms are.
In fact, what you've done there is a really great example of an externalized self-talk as well, because you actually told yourself, you know what, this doesn't matter, it's going to pass, this will be okay. And that is a really powerful tool. Yes, well, at 7 and 4 and 74, we can teach. Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry, just really quickly,
Yes.
saying about the stop button not working.
Yes.
My son is like that, and it's 0 to 100.
Yes.
And it can be overseen. He really struggles. For example, what I've noticed, he can't tell the difference at 7 between an accident and something deliberate.
Yes.
If someone hits, bumps into him in the playground, he's in an insane shaking red rage.
Yes.
But there's no trying to talk him down or convince him. There's no way. He's so argumentative. I could never sort of tell him to think through those stages.
Actually, you've raised a really good point that I've left out. I had a slide saying exactly that. That one of the things that's really important is that we're talking, I'm sharing with you what we do in the calm periods between. So one of my strongest bits of advice to parents is when your child is in a rage zone or an anxiety zone, when they're at a 5, whatever it is, the frontal lobe is completely, the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that does all the good reasoning, thinking, problem solving, is out to lunch. It's not available at that point. So all that you can do at that time is, well, then there will be a time, there must be a time that he calms down.
Yeah, but he'll still argue about
But,
it wasn't an accident, it wasn't helping translate.
Yeah, there's work you could do that. He's 7, of course, he's still quite little. But you've raised a really important point to make, which is to wait until the wave has crashed. Now, one thing I want to say, and I'm sure there are some teachers in the room, teachers have words as their most, the blessing that they bring to teaching is they talk. They talk a lot. They talk all the time. That's what they do all day. Teachers talk. So it's really understandable to me that what I hear about is that they say, I tried to persuade him, I tried to negotiate with him, I tried to talk to him, I used my words when this student was at a 5, out of 3, out of 4, out of 5, and my advice to them is, well, stop talking, provide silence, provide a break. Stop talking, stop using words, wait until this child has calmed down, which might be in an hour or it might be in 3 days. But it is completely counterproductive, and in fact, you know, your children, you've seen it, that you start trying to get them to problem solve or negotiate with them, and it just makes it worse because it's adding fuel to the fire. And I think parents pick up on that intuitively very, very well, and I think teachers sometimes need a little bit of help to understand that notion of not. And I tell you what, front office staff also get a serve from me as well. I cannot tell you the number of times that we are practicing an exit to a quiet place. The teacher's got it dialed, the principal's got it dialed. We'll walk into the front office and the front office staff will both of them at once go, "Oh, Charlie, what have you done this time? What are you here for this time?" And we've lost Charlie again. He's back up to a 5. So it's a whole, for me, it's a whole school approach. Similarly, I think extended family members sometimes, that can be a real issue. You and your child may have a really well-rehearsed, well-practiced, agreed process of exit, and then, auntie, grandma, whatever, cousin, just launches into using words and escalates your child back up again.
Thanks.
Up to that. Yes.
Oh, hi, just following on from that previous question.
Yes.
So when you have a situation where your child is at the 5, you've had no time for the calm down in between.
Yes.
And then they're becoming a danger either to themselves or their siblings.
Yes.
Like I have one that will
Yes.
start hitting us, trying to drink cologne, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Other than restraining him,
Yeah.
I need more strategies, I guess,
Um,
on how to deal with that.
Yeah, obviously that's a specific, you need to be looking in great depth at what other strategies could be available to you. But I think strategies that are developed in the moment, to be used in the moment, are not going to work as well as negotiated strategies. One of the advantages of going through this tortuous process of trying to get kids to recognise it is that you've got a language to use with them, and you have a discussion in between episodes about when that happens, when, and again externalised, when the angry beast hits, not when you decide to lose it, but when you don't get your own way, when the angry beast decides to hit, what is it that we've agreed, rehearsing those strategies, practicing those strategies, having those conversations beforehand, so that you have agreed that these are the things that are going to happen. It doesn't always work, and sometimes, yes, you do have to remove a child physically from a situation where they are dangerous, because that frontal lobe is just so completely overwhelmed at that point that there isn't any reasoning to be done. But at least it gives you a language and a conversation to have afterwards to say, well, that didn't work, so let's have another look at what are we going to do to help you to fight back against that angry beast next time that it happens. Yeah.
Hi, I've just got a different sort of question. My son's 10. He's just developed recently a really intense fear of abandonment. So I'll give you an example. I can get out of the car at the shopping centre and he'll get out on the opposite side to me and he'll have an intense panic attack that he's lost.
Yes.
We bought him a GPS watch recently just to try and say I can track you, I know where you are. He's afraid of going on holidays, that he's going to get lost.
Yeah.
It happened really suddenly, so I don't know what would cause that or what category that fits into.
Yeah, I mean, whether he had Tourette's or not, that's a really severe kind of panic, quick onset panic disorder. Was he unwell? Did he have the flu or any kind of
I can't think of
illness
anything.
prior
I
to
tried
it?
to talk to him about anything that might have happened.
Yeah.
But he does have Tourette's, but
Yes.
I don't know.
We don't really know the mechanism, and I asked, was he unwell, because it's incredibly common for me to hear that those and this is not just with kids with Tourette's, but across the practice generally, those sudden onset panic anxiety disorders are incredibly often, in my mind, triggered by autoimmune issues, by illnesses, by this is where we get into PANS and PANDAS. But that's by the by, just of interest to others of you to be stopping and thinking, okay, has that actually been triggered by an infection? There's a whole more intense way of dealing with that. And do you remember I mentioned when there's an obsessional thought, we're looking at evidence-based checking, the child needing to check how likely is it that... So panic sets in, and anxiety in a nutshell is a child overestimating the likelihood that something bad is going to happen and underestimating the protective factors that are in place to stop it. And he needs help to work through doing that, looking at what the likelihood is, so that he's using his logical brain to fight back. And if you don't have Hey Warrior, go and buy Hey Warrior.
We have that at home.
Yes. So that he understands what's happening is his fight or flight system. I think when it is very sudden onset, it's really worrying, it's distressing for us as parents, it's really distressing, and you tend to be immediately wired to do lots of reassurance and do things like you said, buy a GPS watch to reassure
I
him.
don't know what the right thing is
Well,
to do.
reassurance probably isn't actually, great you bought the GPS watch, probably not something I would recommend, because as soon as we start putting reassuring, you'll be fine, it does two things. First of all, it isolates the child into thinking, she's reassuring me, she doesn't realise how serious it is, she doesn't realise how likely it is that actually something bad's going to happen between the front door and the back door. But the other thing that doing that reassuring does is it actually gives the child more faulty evidence that there's something to be worried about. Do you know?
Yeah,
he actually doesn't need a GPS watch to get from the back door to the front door. And buying him that has,
It's just because he's going to soccer training and
Yes.
he's had himself in such a state that nobody was going to pick him
I
up. So we were all going to pack.
Yeah.
He said we were all going to pack up the house and leave while he was at soccer training.
Yeah, well,
And
that's
we'll never see him again.
and do you understand that's pretty unlikely?
So, yeah.
And
He
you
says, I know, Mum, but you just don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
I'm trying to reassure.
Yeah.
He sees that as me not listening.
Yes,
So,
yes. It's twisted. Like the reassurance aspect of anxiety is a really hard one for parents to get right. Yeah.
Okay, we've got one up there.
Just a quick one. You were talking about the oversensitive alarm system
Yes.
and the fight or flight.
Yes.
With a program, getting through a program with a clinical psychologist, have they been able to actually document brain plasticity or changes in the brain that happen through this sort of program?
There may well be some psychologist somewhere, but not me in a little practice in Adelaide, no. So yes, I could Google that and have a look. Interesting question though.
Okay, we've got one more here and then we'll move on to NDIS.
Okay. So running out of time.
Hi, my son is 12 years old and
Yes.
has recently developed really violent hitting and breaking tics.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he says, oh, Mommy, I have to hit you, but I hate it. I can't live like this. I hate living in fear of hitting you
Yeah.
or hitting sister.
Yeah.
But he's hitting me.
Yeah.
And also, he said, oh, Mommy, I have to break this laptop. Put it away.
Yeah.
I have to do it. And then I put it away, he finds it, break it like that.
It's really common. What you're describing is very common, that one of the biggest differences between really challenging, naughty kids is that they are setting out to cause harm by breaking things. Their goal is to upset you. Their goal is to disrupt. And that's not what we're dealing with kids with Tourettes syndrome. It's a failure of their brain regulation system to stop when clearly a stop button ought to be working. And so what happens is that we also have to be really mindful of those strong feelings of guilt and shame that happen. And it's great that your son can already recognise this, and what I'd be suggesting is that it becomes that he is a prime candidate for that kind of therapeutic approach that involves externalising it. He doesn't want to be doing this, you don't want him to be doing that, the two of you are fighting against that urge for him to do that.
Is it OCD or is it just right?
What I'm really describing is the whole lot for me. Anything under the water is a disinhibition syndrome, and I don't think we need to be spending too much time deciding is it OCD, is it tic, is it. We just get in and do it. For whatever reason, he has a strong urge to do something and a faulty stop button. The button that makes your daughter not hurt you is not working for him. I don't know if you have a daughter, just as an example. So it doesn't really matter what we call it clinically. It's about helping him to practice, building up the skill of holding out against it, of stopping, which is the same basis of the behavioural approaches to tics that we have. It's practicing holding out against the urge until we rewire the brain so that it no longer has that urge to do it. Same sort of thing with the urge to hurt a laptop. Yeah. Alright. NDIS. Oh dear, where do I start? It's been a day. I should be spending a day on NDIS. As Robin mentioned, South Australia was the rollout state for children. So our practice has been a large NDIS provider for 4 years now. In terms of Tourette's syndrome, yes, I was going to say, please feel free to leave if you... Did you want to say anything before people leave if they're not interested? No, that's okay to go. Okay, coming back, getting a cup of tea. Access. The biggest issue confronting families with children with Tourette's syndrome is actually getting into the system, access into the system, into the NDIS system. And there is a great deal of misinformation and misunderstanding out there in social media, in the community, partly because NDIS has done such, oh, this has been recorded, isn't it? Oh, try to be very positive. It has struggled to implement such a complex system. There have been a lot of changes of these kinds of things in the 4 years. It's just, it changes each week. We can, as major providers, we can barely keep up with the changes. So if you're a parent or a family trying to enter into the system, it's really understandable that there is that confusion. But hopefully I can clarify something for you. One of the things that is absolutely essential for you to understand is that there are two pathways of entering into NDIS. One is by meeting Section 25 of the NDIS Act, which defines early intervention, and the requirements for early intervention are listed up there. That there is an identified impairment in any age. Early intervention is not for children alone, it's for anyone. Early intervention means an initial intervention into a particular condition. So I have a client who is 48 and has an acquired brain injury from a car crash a couple of years ago. The neurology has settled down. She's left with functional impairments in her socialisation, her memory, a few other things. She is on early intervention. She's just entered into NDIS and she's on early intervention. So the big issue for, and these are, I put these, this is my italics, not theirs. The big issue for Tourette's syndrome is that the definition is that it is likely to be permanent. It can also be applied to a child who's under the age of 6 years and who has developmental delay. So if you are lucky enough to have a child under the age, well, and again, they're changing, depends which phone number you ring, whether under the age of 6 means under the age of 7 or or not yet 7 or already 6, whatever. But let's just say 6 or 7-ish, you are probably going to be all right at getting onto NDIS under early intervention with a younger child. And this is so important, if you are, both of those two things are met, if you are able to demonstrate that early intervention supports are likely to benefit the client by reducing the impact on or improving their capacity in at least one of these following areas: communication, social interaction, learning, mobility, self-care, self-management. Self-management is executive functioning, for a 7-year-old, self-management is getting themselves up, getting their bag packed, remembering that they've got to take the recorder on Wednesday, those kind of self-management. Self-care is more daily living skills, bathing, washing, dressing, whatever. So if you can meet those criteria, you go in on a short-term basis, you go in to the early intervention stream of NDIS. Now, NDIS in its wisdom has decided not to tell you whether you've gone in under early intervention or disability. We can't find out, it's not written anywhere, it's secret NDIS business. So you may be on this stream and you don't know that you're on this stream until the point that you get a really nasty email which says, because your child entered into the scheme on early intervention, we are now going to need to reevaluate whether they meet the second stream, which is disability requirements. So you get to enter into the scheme under disability requirements if you have a disability that is likely to be permanent, lifelong, and has no cure, although it can fluctuate. So that's so important for Tourette's syndrome. Being able to say that it might, that for anyone over the age of about 14 in my books, I would feel confident saying this is likely to be lifelong, although it could fluctuate. It could wax and wane so much that in fact it's not even evident for 10 years. But that does not mean Tourette's syndrome's gone away, it just means that it's waxed or waned. And so you must have that condition, but again, do you see the same thing? Substantially reduced functional capacity in at least one of these areas, and it's the same areas listed. So you get into disability either because you started in early intervention and you were assessed as subsequently meeting disability, or you enter straight into disability. Now, there is a lot of talk online about what conditions will mean that you are eligible for NDIS and what conditions, and whether Tourette's syndrome is on a list anywhere. There was stuff on the Facebook page this morning or yesterday about the list. Can I just clarify for you? There is no disability or condition or impairment that is precluded from NDIS. Every disability, every impairment has the possibility that you may be eligible for NDIS. It's just that, to simplify things, NDIS has designated List A, which are conditions that are likely, but in fact in reality do, automatically meet the disability requirements under Section 24 of the NDIS Act. Then there is, and Tourette's syndrome does not appear on that list, but so does practically nothing else appear on that list. Like, it is quite a small list. Then there is List B, which are permanent conditions for which functional capacity are variable and further assessment of functional capacity is genuinely required. And that is a much longer list, but it's also an open-ended list. So, for example, I have just supported the application of a child that both neurologists and 2 paediatricians and myself have no idea. There is no diagnosis, there is no description of this child, nothing is showing up in terms of genetic studies, but he has severe disability. He's non-verbal and has a really low IQ. So you can't have him on a list because there is no name for him, but he absolutely has just entered into NDIS under the early intervention programs. List D, permanent impairment, early intervention under 7 years, no further assessment required. Again, it's quite a small list. Doesn't matter that Tourette's syndrome is not on it. What does this mean? If you are not, if you have a child whose conditions are not on any of those lists, it doesn't matter. It just means that you have to provide evidence to show that there is, going back to this slide, substantially reduced functional capacity in one or more of those areas. You have to provide evidence for it. So, are we following so far? There is no need for Tourette's syndrome to be on a list. So, how does this work in practice? You contact the NDIS helpline. You wait for 8 hours. They answer. They take a message, they go back, whatever. You will be deemed eligible. The number of families around Australia that have rung me and said, I am so excited I've been deemed eligible. Nuh-uh. Eligible means that you live in the right state and are the right age. It just means that, and you've got Australian citizenship. Unless you're in New South Wales, where it's a little bit different. You need to read about that because you're in New South Wales. But deemed eligible just means, as I described to parents, there's a big paddock out there with a gate, all the sheep are in it, and you've just been allowed to get in from this paddock to that paddock. You're now in the paddock with all the people that are deemed eligible. You used to be on the outside, just the beginning. There's no sorting of you yet. You are just still a sheep running around the paddock. It's just a different paddock now. The next step is that you have to complete an access request form where you provide information about the areas of impairment, these things. Communication, how does whatever's going on for my child, or myself as an adult, how is it impacting on these things? And haven't we talked a lot today about all of those things? Absolutely, Tourette's syndrome impacts on all of those. Not all of them for every child, but for your child there will be more than one that you can tick. For some of you, you would tick all of those. You would say Tourette's syndrome and the under the surface. You can see now why this is my passion, working under the surface with the conditions. This is what's going on. So you are needing to fill out an access request form, and then you get put into a slightly smaller paddock, which is the paddock of people that might become eligible for NDIS. But unfortunately, and this is a huge criticism of mine, I believe that the people that know best what the functional impairment is are you, its parents, and if you're an adult, yourself. Unfortunately, NDIS doesn't see it that way. They think that someone like me, who may never have met you before or have never met your child before, is more reliable as a source of information than you are. Do not get me started on that, but that is the reality. NDIS will expect that you have an objective assessment of the functional impairment in those specified areas. So, for example, for my clients with Tourettes Syndrome, what I do is to write an assessment of functional impairment which uses standardised assessment tools, the Yale Global TIC Scale. Some of you will be familiar with these, the ABAS, the Vineland, social skills assessments, SSA, it's whatever else I can grab that is standardised and which relates to the child's particular areas of functional impairment. And I write that up. And so far, 100% success across not just Tourettes Syndrome. Like we do this for every child. So every child that our practice has done an assessment of functional impairment of has got into the little corral now. They've got out of the paddock and they're in that little narrow thing where they're heading towards getting shorn, just to use my paddock analogy. And then you are on your way towards an NDIS plan, and there will be a planning meeting where you sit down with a planner and you have a discussion about the goals and the supports that you're requesting and how those supports are likely to help your child and how that's going to impact. And it's really, and mostly that is a very positive step in the process. Sitting down with the planner, they're really interested in your life, they want to hear more about it, but they still want you to wave bits of paper at them written by people like me, which I object to, but they do require that. And then you're just on that chute and you're just waiting like those little sheep that just are waiting and waiting and waiting, and they don't know whether they're about to get shorn or eaten or what's going to happen, but they're just stuck there, and then finally you will get shot out the chute with a plan. Sometimes the plan just goes up on the NDIS portal and we find it before the parent is even told they've got it. Sometimes you get an email to tell you it's on its way and it comes through. Sometimes you get a plan that is written to a child who's not even your child. That happens quite often too. But you will actually get a plan with some funded support. And then that lasts 12 months. We can talk a little bit more about that if you want to. But I think a lot of you are a long way off that. You're still back in the you're still out in the external paddock at the moment. But at the end of the 12 months, there needs to be a review of progress towards those goals. And if there's been enough progress and it's looking like this is helpful, then the plan will be renewed again. A new plan will be written for the next 12 months with goals that are more relevant to the next 12 months, and so it goes on. But I'm not going to talk too much about that. That's for another day. Just to give you an idea of the kind of flavour of the goals, these are goals that I've written that are in the plans of my clients with Tourettes Syndrome. You can read them: to develop strategies to regulate my emotions, to develop my understanding and management of my tics, to improve my sleep routine so that I'm not so tired during the day, become better in managing my anger so that I can get on better with other people, and so on. Very important one down the bottom is covered under the NDIA Act to strengthen my parents' skills and capacity to support my needs so that their informal support can be sustained. It is an absolute joy of NDIS that it recognises that fitting your oxygen mask is a really important part of outcomes for kids, which no other system, Medicare, private health, do not recognise. It's really a great thing about NDIS. I haven't said enough about what's great about NDIS, that's why. Okay, now, questions, I'm sure. I'm just going to leave that up there for you to take a screenshot or write it down before I take as many questions as you let me take. But before I go on to that, just to say to you that I had a quick look yesterday, and it is very clear to me that there's some New South Wales specific information. In particular, going back to those lists, there is List E, which I'd never looked at before till last night, because I don't practice in New South Wales, which is qualifying programs. So clients of specified New South Wales disability programs are given automatic entry to the disability stream, which is great news. So have a look at List E if your child is already accessing, or you are already accessing, those specified New South Wales disability programs. You've just won the lottery. No one else in Australia has got that. All right, now, yes.
Actually, I am from New South Wales.
Right,
and
yes.
I have contacted the NDIS before about
Yes.
my daughter's Tourette's.
Yes.
They actually said flat out she does not fit any of the boxes or lists, as you say.
Yes,
and
that's
so
right.
don't even bother.
Okay, so that's the wrong advice. Yes, she doesn't meet the lists, and that's right. She doesn't. There's no, and it doesn't matter. The approach is to there is nothing in the Act that says that these are specified disorders. Every person in Australia that has some form of functional impairment on the basis of an established neurological deficit, and that includes Tourette's syndrome, you need to go through the process of filling in the access request form and putting up the evidence and seeing what happens. And I mean, I have many clients on NDIS.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and I appreciate you bringing all this up, because they were like, neurological doesn't count, all of these things. I've got NDIS with my son who's, the alphabet very easily.
Yes.
And I think that my daughter's condition is more debilitating.
Yes,
than his.
it is, that's right.
And
looking in terms of functional impairment. So if you are at that point where you've got NDIS telling you, the person on the helpline telling you, then you try again on a different day, which I'm sure you've done. Then you email them and ask for it to be escalated to the National Access team. So there's a national team in Canada that makes decisions about it. And then you go to your local member of parliament.
It's good to know there's options. I just can't give up. I'm just like,
No,
if we're going to
just
it's okay.
persevering.
We'll just manage.
Yeah. And how old is your daughter?
13.
Yeah, so you want to go in under early intervention, but you need someone to back you up. You need a psychologist or a paediatrician or a neurologist.
We have all of those.
Yes,
so
great.
It's good.
Yes, that's good.
Right,
Yeah, good luck. Keep pushing on. Yeah.
Just before we go on, sorry,
Yes.
only because I just want to
Yes.
say, apologies, my talk won't happen because we've run out of time, but that's okay. I'm now super prepared for the next conference. But I will, on our website, I have a podcast already there about education and Tourette's in the education system. So if you go to our website and look under the Educators tab, you will find a podcast there for that purpose. The psychosocial aspects I'm happy to do at another time. I can organise or pre-record something. And for anyone who needs to leave, because I realise we've reached 4 o'clock, if you are attending tomorrow and you haven't RSVP'd to the picnic, please tell Annie, where are you? Annie? She's, please tell Annie, she's not here, but she's outside, because she's got to go and buy all the sausages. So thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
After having received our initial reply from my son from the NDIS that said, no, we don't consider Tourette's syndrome to be a permanent condition. I've got to say, they weren't impressed when I rang them up and I spoke to the devices on the phone and I asked if they were secure or if he could grow out of it. Because they sort of had them stumped. But are you able to give us the people that actually decide? Like, I know they've got a checklist they've got to go through, but who is it that actually decides? Are they people with any sort of medical background or psychologists?
No, they're not. And I think the important thing is that you can fill out this access request form without mentioning Tourette. Oh, sorry. You can fill out an access request form without mentioning Tourette's syndrome, other than one single box which says what is the main disability or impairment and is it likely to be permanent or not. There's 5 other pages to fill out that talk about the functional impairment, and very importantly, there's a box that says, is intervention likely to reduce the impact on and improve the functional capacity of the person? And if you can go yes to those 3 boxes, my experience has been you get onto the system, because that's what early intervention is designed to do. So Tourette's syndrome doesn't matter. There are a number of access request forms that I fill in every month where I have to write no known etiology, meaning we don't know there's no label to put there, but I'm not kids with Tourette's syndrome, but other clients, and I'm going on and writing it. So letting go of the idea of it's because of Tourette's syndrome, and instead thinking, I want to paint a picture of my child's everyday disability. The permanent thing, I think, also is something that has to be dealt with at a national level by the association dealing with NDIS. this idea of someone in NDIS has decided, and I shared with Robin that the National Access Manager said to me, oh, is it Tourettes Syndrome? It stops at 16. And I said, no, I'd like to introduce you to a few people who are well over the age of 16.
And just on that point, I'd say that they don't have an excuse to not know now. In April this year, Professor Sachdev and I both gave a talk to the local access coordinators, managers. It was recorded for education to go nationally. So they have the content now from the head neuropsychiatrist in the country with the most knowledge about Tourette's syndrome, and myself, which I spoke from the psychosocial family aspect. He spoke about all the pure medical aspects. So they have that information recorded purposely to educate their local area managers.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And there is a whole system of appeal. Like the system was set up with masses of layers of appeal, the ultimate being the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. Just to give you an idea, there's 14,500 reviews waiting in South Australia alone at the moment. Appeals by participants about errors of judgment. But so if a decision's been made by NDIS, you take it to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal down this pathway. But if they haven't yet made a decision, and in fact not letting you onto the scheme is not yet a decision of the scheme, then you go to the Ombudsman. It's a failure of a government organisation to make the right decision. Does that make sense? You've got two different pathways to go down next.
I've got to say, a 5-year-old who has only got 18 months left of school and realising the difficulties that his Tourette's and all the comorbidities are causing with his education. Hearing that, that 14,000 people waiting for appeals and everything, I don't have much hope to get assistance for my son before.
Which is really a pity, because there's a whole category of support called transition from school to education. There's a whole series of item numbers, and I have 2 clients who are in their final year of school, and each have been given the $24,000 worth of support that is associated with that category, specifically in a 12-month period available to a child transitioning from school into the workplace or further education. So you've got to remember that it's an insurance scheme, so the imperative, it's been set up. The government wants, where's Adam? He needs to be the government admin. The government wants people, it's investment of government, of taxpayers' money now to reduce the need for further expenditure. And the 2 big areas of further expenditure that are trying to be reduced are firstly the dependence on disability support pension, which is where kids will end up if they don't have that support to transition out of school.
Well, that's already been suggested.
Yep.
So, as I said to them, this is a kid who knows what he wants to do, where he wants to go.
Needs the support.
Which gets corporate to get through self-governance. And, I mean, I remember applying years ago for my eldest son, and I appealed it, it was still denied for different reasons, but different requirements. And I didn't, I was just it was no, this is too hard for me, but now
it is too hard. That's the thing. This is a system that's asking parents who are already exhausted and already carry much more of a load to take on and fight up against a system that shouldn't be a fight. It should be, I totally understand that, but knowing where the mechanisms are and what's available is. Should give you some hope.
Also on that, something that was pointed out, Rosita and I visited the disability minister last year when we went to Canberra, and she pointed out quite strongly that the NDIS does not actually support your support within the education system. That's the education system, the education department, so you have to draw that line. So then in that case, if that's sort of the support you need, and this is really hard for us as parents because we don't know what's what and who's supposed to support what. So then it's go to the school, go to the education department and get into that system as well.
We are fortunate that school has been incredibly supportive this year. He's new to that school and they're just from the word go, you know, they're doing everything they can.
That's great.
But there are so many other things that
You need both.
it's not at school, but
I just want to make sure you knew that they realised that it didn't do what you wanted at school as well.
So,
Has anyone else got any more questions? So I'm just really short on time. So just don't want them to miss out.
can I just make a comment that, in following up on what you said about schools, if you look at these goals, I'd love to find a school that's doing any of that. They're not doing any of it. You know, teachers are so under stress and are working at so many levels. And yes, they're doing some fantastic support, but they're not doing therapy. And NDIS provides you with resources for therapy. So working at becoming better at managing my anger so I can get on better with my family and friends. Absolutely, there's some great strategies that teachers with you are putting in place, but there's a whole lot more that can be done. So our practice we support 140 students a week in schools. There are 140 hours of therapy time spent in schools every week. So supporting kids using NDIS funding to manage to get on better. So the ideal thing is you have a therapist there at lunchtime who is actually coaching and noticing, oh, look at that early warning sign, what can you do, blah, blah, you know, that sort of stuff. And that's held up by NDIS as a model. That practice about that bit of what we do is frequently referred to as NDIS as a model of what could work, and we're in schools. So, you know, people talk about you can't, you know, it's not work that can be done in schools. Well, it can be, so long as it has a disability, therapy, functional impairment kind of focus. Yes, side by side is the thing. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to say thank you very much, Jenny. It's absolutely amazing. Your insight and knowledge. We've been working really hard to try and gain access to this level of information, and Rosita and I met with the NDIS representative a while back, and it was, you know, in that meeting, the first roadblock for me was, how do we get, you know, where do they download the application form? No, you've got to ring this number. I went, you're kidding me. And what are the hours of that number? 9 to 5. I said, roadblock number 1. I think in that meeting I got to 10 roadblocks. I wasn't very popular. Rosita was there. She went to the follow-up meeting because I had to cool down. I had to go and do one of the law therapies. So it is a learning curve. It's very difficult. So to feel empowered, to have a strategy and a structure to follow, and to feel that it's okay if you get knocked back, to escalate. And I think that's the key. Just keep trying. And I think the key of just about everything we've learnt today is perseverance as a parent in whatever we're doing. Perseverance as a person with Tourette's in trying to find a therapy or a medication or some sort of technique of management skill to help you cope with your condition, I think is such a strength to have. So if we can all support each other and help one another persevere, that's even better. And on that note, I'll just mention, for those that don't know, we have Facebook pages that are closed pages. We have our public page. We also have closed groups. There's a newly opened one by Laura Sales, who's the administrator. She was at our camp in New South Wales for young adults. So it's essentially age groups 16 to 35, I think. So feel free to connect to that if you're a young adult in the room. Laura is, whilst, you know, she's there, she's a psychologist as well and a counsellor, so we do really trust her, but it is, you know, it is Facebook. Just remember, it's the liability's not on us, what's said in there. And I'd like to thank you all for coming. Big thank you to Rosita. Rosita, Harvey at the back from the office, in the Tourette's office. They both have worked extremely hard. I'd like to thank Megan over here that wasn't here earlier, our treasurer. We've still got, I'm trying to think, any other committee members in the audience? I can't see you. Anthony at the back with his t-shirt on. He did all the hats for us and the t-shirt designs. Thank you, Anthony. We're a very small group of people, a committee of 5, not all function all at the same time, it turns out, but we have a really lovely army of support through Annie's group of support group coordinators, the people that do the Facebook administration. You know, there's a huge role, the phone volunteers, and just the way you all support one another. That's what's really important as well. And thanks for coming.